This woman could only be 18 or 19 years old at most, yet she had already reached Element Gathering tier? But how could it be that a warrior of Element Gathering tier would speak such nonsense? Hang Zhan was taken aback for a moment, but quickly snorted in disdain. So what if she had reached Element Gathering tier? At this age, she must have only just broken through. How could she possibly oppose Elder Yu? Elder Yu, subdue her! Hang Zhan's heart flared with lust. As a cultivator in the body refining tier, the thought of holding down a master in the Element Gathering tier beneath him and toying with her filled him with a deep sense of satisfaction, especially when the girl before him was so exquisitely beautiful. His desire to act was nearly unbearable. Elder Yu, though cautious, did not see Lu Yutong as a true threat. After all, she was so young. He assumed that the girl was only in the first or second layer of the Element Gathering tier, perhaps the third at best. Elder Yu himself was a seasoned fighter at the 9th layer of Element Gathering. Though he knew he could not break through to Gushing Spring tier in this life, on the plane of Element Gathering, few could stand on even ground with him. "Young miss, surrender now to avoid unnecessary suffering," Elder Yu said, his voice dripping with disdain. Killing intent flickered in Lu Yutong's eyes. She was the princess of the Lu clan. What was a mere stone wolf sect to the 8 great clans of the imperial city? How dare this Hang Zhan entertain evil intentions towards her? He was clearly seeking death. Yet, recalling her current situation, she turned to Ling Han, her eyes filled with question. Ling Han gave a casual shrug and said, "This kind of scoundrel, if you wish to kill him, do as you will." Lu Yutong turned back and released the full force of her aura, the 9th layer of Element Gathering tier radiating from her like a storm. It rivaled Elder Yu's aura, showing no sign of retreat. "What?" Elder Yu paled instantly, his breath faltering in shock. 9th layer of Element Gathering tier? How can this be? The revelation stunned not just Elder Yu, but also Liu Dong and his companions, who watched, their faces twitching in disbelief. Not only had she reached the Element Gathering tier, but to do so at such a young age was already an unimaginable feat. Liu Dong and his friends, who had reached the 8th and 9th layers of body refining, had hoped that they could break through to Element Gathering tier within a year or two. But to see a woman under 20 achieve the 9th layer of Element Gathering was an entirely different matter. Elder Yu, now thoroughly alarmed, clasped his fists in apology. "Please forgive my young master's earlier impertinence, young miss. I apologize on his behalf." Though he stood at the 9th layer of Element Gathering tier himself, Elder Yu recognized that Lu Yutong's strength at such a young age was not something to be trifled with. More so, it was her background that truly terrified him. Hang Zhan, though irritated and unwilling to let go, knew when to pick his battles. Even he, a proud and arrogant man, understood that some people should never be crossed. Lu Yutong was in that category. Lu Yutong waved her hand dismissively. "I won't kill you. Get out of my way." How dare anyone think of committing blasphemy against the princess of the Lu clan and survive? "Miss, do not be too excessive." Elder Yu's voice turned grim. He could not let Hang Zhan die without action. Lu Yutong gave no response. She stepped into an offensive stance. Yellow-grade high-level martial arts skill, snapping of the plum hands. Elder Yu's face darkened, recognizing the skill. He raised his own hands, transforming them into claw-like shapes. Yellow-grade medium-level martial arts skill. Flying eagle claws, Liu Dong declared. As a master of claw techniques, he immediately recognized the form. "Ling Han, will the one from your family be all right?" The group of 5 had already gathered around Ling Han, and now Lu Yutong was their only hope. Ling Han smiled softly. She should be fine. Should be. Liu Dong's group exchanged uneasy glances. Should be was far from reassuring. With both combatants at the 9th layer of Element Gathering tier, who could predict the outcome? While they were conversing, Lu Yutong and Elder Yu had already engaged in fierce combat. The clash was so fast, their figures blurred like shadows in the wind. Both fighters were masters in the 9th layer of Element Gathering, and Liu Dong's group could barely track their movements. The fight seemed to be unfolding in slow motion, yet neither could they sense who was gaining the upper hand. Hang Zhan, watching with bated breath, was visibly anxious. If Elder Yu lost, he would certainly meet his end as well, His worry was palpable. But after 3 to 5 minutes, the pace of the battle slowed, so much so that Liu Dong and his group could now see the fight clearly. Even they realized that the battle had become far too slow. Ling Han's face, however, betrayed a hint of worry. Slow movements didn't mean the fight was easing up. On the contrary, it was now a critical moment. One mistake from either combatant would lead not to a mere defeat, but to death. Ling Han recalled his time spent training Liu Yutong in recent days. Though he himself was a heaven-tier cultivator, any bit of insight he could share would be invaluable for a lower-tier fighter. Liu Yutong was sharp, and under his tutelage, her strength had risen sharply. In this battle, she should be able to win. The exchange between Liu Yutong and Elder Yu slowed further. Elder Yu, a longtime expert, was experienced in the element gathering tier, while Liu Yutong, though young, had a genius's potential and had benefited greatly from Ling Han's guidance. Elder Yu's brow was slick with cold sweat. The pressure of death was upon him, yet he dared not take his focus away for even a moment. He knew any distraction would lead to his demise. Liu Yutong, on the other hand, was growing increasingly calm. It was clear now she was the one winning. Liu Dong and his companions saw the outcome, and their worry dissolved into smiles. Even Hang Zhan, seeing the writing on the wall, began to retreat, preparing to flee at the first opportunity. "You're in such a rush. Where are you going?" Ling Han shot forward like an arrow, blocking Hang Zhan's path. "Get out of my way!" Hang Zhan shouted, "I am from the Stone Wolf sect, and you dare to challenge me? I'll slaughter your entire family." How arrogant. Ling Han drew his sword, his gaze cold and murderous. There was no need for words with a man like this. The only thing left to do was to strike him down. "Ling Han, don't be rash!" Liu Dong shouted, his voice filled with panic. If Hang Zhan died, no clan would survive the wrath of the Stone Wolf sect. "Ha ha! Listen to your friend's advice and never oppose me. Otherwise, death is the only fate awaiting you," Hang Zhan scoffed, preparing to flee. "You're lucky today." But just as he attempted to flee, he felt a cold sensation at his neck. A long sword pressed against his skin, sending chills down his spine. "There is no one I fear killing," Ling Han said coldly, his voice unwavering. "Kneel." Hang Zhan dared not resist. The icy gaze of Ling Han froze him in place. This man was clearly someone who kept his word. "Apologize," Ling Han commanded. Hang Zhan could only suppress his rage, bowing his head, thinking that once he returned to the Stone Wolf sect, his grandfather would personally avenge him, wiping out these fools before him. The two beautiful girls would be spared to become his playthings. "I was wrong. I am inhumane," Hang Zhan pleaded for mercy. "I hope you become a better person in your next life," Ling Han said coolly. "No." Hang Zhan's words caught in his throat as the sharp pain in his neck intensified. His vision darkened, and his eyes widened in shock. Blood sprayed from his neck as he collapsed, never to rise again. At the same time, Liu Yutong gave a soft sigh, her hands turning Elder Yu's body to stone. Only after a long while did his body finally collapse to the ground. "This will cause a great catastrophe," Liu Dong and his companions sighed in unison. Ling Han withdrew his sword, his expression calm yet carrying a subtle smile. "Will you speak of what has transpired here today?" he asked softly. "Of course not." Liu Dong and the others hastily shook their heads in unison, their voices laced with sincerity and a touch of unease. "Very well, then," Ling Han continued, his tone light. "None of us here will speak of this, so who would ever know that Hang Zhan and his lackey perished here?" However, despite Ling Han's casual demeanor, Liu Dong and his companions could not fully cast aside their fears. The name of the Stone Wolf sect struck terror deep within their hearts. With such a powerful sect, their own clans could be wiped out 100 times over. The fear of being silenced by Ling Han lingered in their minds, especially since they all held a green spiritual fruit in their hands. This fruit, valuable and rare, only heightened their sense of unease. Without further words, they bade Ling Han a hasty farewell and swiftly disappeared from his sight. Eager to distance themselves from the danger, killing the witnesses, Ling Han had no intention of doing so. After all, his little attendant, Liu Yutong, was none other than the princess of the Liu clan, a noble lineage in the imperial city. In comparison, what was the insignificant Hang Zhan? Should the Stone Wolf sect learn of his evil intentions towards Liu Yutong, They might very well personally execute him as an apology. Just as Liu Dong and his group feared the Stone Wolf sect, what did the Stone Wolf sect count for in the eyes of the 8 great clans? Ling Han's thoughts shifted inward as he considered the green spiritual fruit in his hand. He would consume one of them now, allowing it to propel him to the peak of the 9th layer of body refining tier. The second one would be saved for later to ease his breakthrough into the element gathering tier. Despite traversing all 9 tiers in his journey from body refining to heaven tier, the gap between these realms was not so easily crossed. To break through the boundaries between tiers, one needed an immense amount of energy, not just comprehension or understanding of the martial realm. The energy required could be sourced from spiritual medicine, alchemical pills, treasures from demonic beasts, or even spiritual fluids from nature. Alas, such resources were incredibly rare. This scarcity was the reason so few martial artists could ascend to higher tiers. Without proper resources, one could only rely on their own power to slowly accumulate the energy needed to break through. Some would succeed, but others would explode from overaccumulation. Had Ling Han not possessed the green spiritual fruit, he would have required several days' worth of origin power to reach the peak of the 9th layer of body refining tier before attempting to break through to the element gathering tier. But with the fruit, he could bypass this lengthy process and break through much more swiftly. Ling Han then began looting the bodies of Hong Zhan and Elder Yu. Though they had been traveling, they had not carried much in terms of wealth. A few 100,000 coins and a secret martial arts manual were all he found. The coins amounted to around 100,000. No small sum. The book, titled Detonation Arts, was a peculiar martial art that allowed a practitioner to inject origin power into objects, causing them to explode. It would be difficult for an opponent to defend against such an attack. Elder Yu must have recently acquired this manual, for he had yet to master it. Had Lu Yutong been caught off guard by such a technique during their battle, she would have certainly suffered. Ling Han and Lu Yutong then moved to a new location, leaving behind the 2 lifeless bodies. Their presence would surely spoil their mood. Ling Han sat cross-legged, taking out the green spiritual fruit. After rinsing it in some clean water, he devoured it with large, eager bites. It was a delicious fruit, though its quality could not be considered high. Nevertheless, within moments, he finished it, feeling a sense of dissatisfaction, as though he could have eaten more. Suppressing the urge to immediately consume the second fruit, Ling Han sat still, waiting for the medicinal effects to begin. In mere moments, the green spiritual fruit's powerful medicinal effects began to circulate within his body, breaking down into countless tiny particles that flowed into his bloodstream, spreading throughout his entire being. Ling Han activated his 5 elements heaven-grade skill. His spirit base, housed within his dantian, began to glow like a radiant lotus flower, guiding the medicinal essence to nourish every part of his body. Flesh, bones, veins, and all. His cultivation, already progressing swiftly, accelerated even further with the support of the fruit. He had been in the middle stage of the 7th layer of body refining tier, but now, with the fruit's aid, his progress was almost frightening. He quickly ascended through the late stage and then reached the peak of the 7th layer. He gathered origin power, and in a single breath broke through to the 8th layer. By the time the medicinal effects began to subside, Ling Han found himself at the middle stage of the 8th layer of body refining tier. Excellent, he thought, pleased with his progress. This saved me about 6 days of work. Lu Yutong, observing Ling Han's swift rise in cultivation, had a strange thought. It was the first time she was not astounded by Ling Han's rapid ascension. After all, considering he had consumed a green spiritual fruit, such a rise in cultivation was to be expected. The two continued their journey, and Ling Han focused on refining his swordsmanship, aiming to achieve 3 flashes of sword chi before he would break through to the element gathering tier. 8 days later, Ling Han had reached the peak of the 8th layer of body refining tier. After a night of accumulating origin power, he began his breakthrough to the 9th layer. By the time the sun rose, he stood, a faint smile playing at his lips. The 9th layer of body refining tier. Perfect, Ling Han thought. In about 10 days, I'll reach the peak of the ninth layer. Then, I can consume the second green spiritual fruit and break through to the element gathering tier in one go. Lu Yutong by now was thoroughly accustomed to Ling Han's rapid progress. She no longer showed shock at his feats. In fact, should he break through to element gathering tier tomorrow, she might not even feel surprised. If she were to be shocked every time Ling Han did something incredible, she feared she might die of shock. 10 days passed quickly, and as expected, Ling Han reached the peak of the ninth layer. He took out the second green spiritual fruit and smiled. Today is my last day in the body refining tier. It really has been a long time. Lu Yutong rolled her eyes. She had been with Ling Han since he was only at the second layer of body refining tier. How long had it been? Just 1 month. And this was the long time he was speaking of? But then again, recalling how Ling Han had once stagnated in the second layer for years, his words were not without merit. Ling Han swallowed the second green spiritual fruit, preparing for his breakthrough to the element gathering tier. He did not rush, choosing instead to gather the fruit's medicinal energy within his body. When a martial artist began the breakthrough process, they typically had to attack the barrier repeatedly until it loosened enough to allow passage. But Ling Han had confidence that, with enough accumulated energy, he would succeed on his first attempt. Half an hour later, his body was filled with origin power, and he felt as though his body was swelling. This sensation was not literal, but the result of excessive energy building up inside him. If he did not break through soon, the energy could rupture his body. It's almost time, Ling Han thought. Now I just need to guide this energy towards my Dantian and push against the barrier. Body refining tier required the storage of origin power throughout the body's blood and flesh, limiting the amount a practitioner could hold. The element gathering tier, on the other hand, opened up the Dantian to create a small world within. Boom! With a tremendous force, a small crack appeared in his Dantian. Unlike others who might need repeated attempts, Ling Han's energy was sufficient to break through instantly. The first step was to open the Dantian. The second, and far more critical step, was to form an origin power nucleus that revolved at high speed. This nucleus would generate power that could erupt into devastating attacks. Element gathering tier could easily overwhelm the body refining tier. Once the origin nucleus formed, energy flowed faster and more powerfully, allowing the user to strike with overwhelming force, even if both combatants had the same amount of origin power.